Today I'm going to talk about a problem that I have in my Kubernetes cluster. In my cluster I have several workloads that are exposed via an ingress. The problem is that the ingress needs to have DNS resolution. And in my particular setup in my network, I run a UDM Pro. And a UDM Pro is not an easy thing to actually put in network DNS entries. So the solution is going to be to create a Pihole on a Pi4 running K3S. What we'll then do is we'll take the DHCP settings in the Unify Pro, point the DNS back up to the Pi4, and then that will resolve all of our ingresses. Initially what we'll do is we'll set up a single A record that will point to the IP address of our ingress controllers. We'll then set up C names to point back to this A record, allowing us an easy way to create each of the ingresses. So let's get started. Before we start, we need to set up networking for the node. I will be creating a new VLAN for the DNS server so that later on it will not be affected by the DHCP changes. So let's log on to the UDM Pro and create a new network. I will call it DNS service, taking note that it has been giving a VLAN ID of 7. Now that we created the VLAN, we will log on to the Pi4 and set it up, ready for running solely on the new VLAN. First, we need to install the Network Manager tools. If we look at the interface configuration, we can see that ETH0 is up, but not the VLAN subnet that we created. Now we can use nmcli to create a new connection for VLAN 7 using ETH0 as the parent device. Rechecking the interfaces, we can see that VLAN 7 is up and has an IP address in the range as expected. We will reboot to make sure that the system boots with the interface. However, I found an issue off camera in that ETH0 was still obtaining an IP address that was fixed by adding deny interface ETH0 to the bottom of the etc dhcpd conf file, as per the displayed website. Links in the description. Now when we log in, we can see that VLAN 7 has an IP address and that ETH0 has none. As a prerequisite for running Kubernetes, we need to turn on cgroups in the kernel by appending to the boot command line text file the following, and then rebooting the node. After the node has finished rebooting, SSH back into the node and sudo root. We can now install K3S directly using a single line curl command. This command will set up the container runtime, networking and local storage drivers and start up the K3S server. Now that the node is ready, it's time to set up Pihole. I have made available via GitLab all the YAML files required, so let's clone the repository. Links in the description. Now we can cd into the repository and create a namespace for the deployment. Then edit the ingress files and update the 2 host entries to be suitable for your network. Once that is done, we are ready to install, and that can be done by telling kubecontrol to apply all the files in the current directory. Checking the pods in the Pihole namespace, we can see they are running. Looking at the service, we can see both the DNS and the ingress are sharing the same IP. Take note of it as we will be using it later on our UDM Pro for DNS resolution. Let's start configuring our UDM Pro. After logging into the UDM, navigate to the network devices as we need to set a fixed IP for our Raspberry Pi. You can do this by clicking anywhere on the row for that device. From the pop-out menu, select the settings and drop down the network section, turning on fixed IP. The IP displayed is the one that is currently issued by the DHCP server. Now press Apply Changes. Next we need to update the DNS server for our networks. So select the Settings gear icon from the left-hand menu, then Networks, and edit the network you wish to send DNS queries back via Pihole. Under the Advanced Settings, change the DHCP name server to manual. Now we can add our Pihole IP address as the first server, making sure to add the gateway address as a second IP address, so that if Pihole fails, DNS resolution will still be available via the UDM, and apply those changes. Now to add some DNS entries to Pihole. As the Pihole itself is not resolvable, we need to add an entry in the host file so that we can navigate to the admin console. We do this by adding an entry in the etc host file. Now opening a browser to its hostname, we can go to the local DNS and add an A record pointing to the IP address for the Pihole. Next, to set up a CNAME to point the Pihole back to the A record we just set. Let's go back to the console and test it. We can now resolve our Pihole back to its CNAME and IP address. Also, if we remove the entry from the host file, we can confirm that everything is working. From here, when we add more pods with ingress access requirements, we simply add them as a CNAME in Pihole for easy access. If you liked the video, please press the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.